Hello, today we're going to be taking notes on page 73 and 74 of your interactive notebook. The notes today are going to be on rational number conversion, converting between decimals, fractions, and percents. In math, we use all three of those different types of rational numbers for different purposes, and you need to be able to translate between the three different types. So the essential question for this set of notes is, how do I convert rational numbers in order to list them on a number line? When we are comparing fractions, or we're comparing decimals, or we're comparing percents, or we're comparing multiples of different ones of those, you have to make them all the same type of number in order to be able to compare them. It's really difficult to compare fractions to percents. But if you convert a fraction to a percent, then you can compare those values. And whether a number is in a percent form or a fraction form or a decimal form, it still has the same value. It just looks a little different. So our standard that we're doing is 6, number system 6. And by the end of this lesson, you should be able to position rational numbers on a number line. Don't forget, the rational numbers are any number that could be written as a decimal or fraction. And the first thing that we're going to do is we're going to convert a decimal to a percent. In order to do this, remember that a percent is a per 100. We talked about that word per, means for every. And we talked about cent is out of 100. And so, and we think of like pennies, we call them cents. And there's 100 cents in a dollar. So it's for every 100 is when we think of a percent. So when we do this, we're going to move our decimal point 2 digits or 2 places to the right. And I like to think of the percent sign. When you think of a percent sign, it looks like this, right? And there's 2 little dots that we have, or 2 little circles. That tells me, when I think of it, it helps my mind to remember 2 spots. Percentages is for every 100. It's 2 spots, and we're going to move 2 spots to the right. So move the decimal 2 places to the right. And what it looks like is this. If you see this example, we get 36 hundredths. I'm going to start where the decimal point is here, and I'm going to just move it 1 spot, 2 spots. And now I'm not going to put the decimal point there. I could, but it's unnecessary because there's no numbers after it. So 36 or 36.0 means the exact same thing. It's just you don't need to necessarily have the decimal point there. But what I do need to have there is the percent sign. So we know that 36 hundredths is the same value as 36%. So like I said, look at that. When you're thinking, I'm going to go to percent, I need to move my decimal. And how many times do I move it? I move it twice, because there's 2 little dots that reminds me 2 place values to the right. All right, so then let's look at the next one. If I'm going from a percent to a fraction. Now remember, we said per 100, for every 100. So if we're going to move a percent to a fraction, we're going to put that percent value over another number in a fraction form. And that over that we're going to put it over is 100, because it's for every 100. So you're going to put the number over 100, because percent means per 100. And then always remember to simplify. So what we have here is 89%. I'm going to put 89 on top as my numerator, and I'm going to put 100 as my denominator. And I can't reduce that. 89 and 100, they don't have common factors that we can pull out. So we're stuck with that. So it's done. So converting from a percent to a fraction is pretty simple. You just take the number, put it right over 100, and there you go. And then simplify if you can. Now you might say, well, what, Miss Engel, do I do if I had 89.5%? Well, you would put 89.5 over 100. You can do that. So, yeah, so you can definitely use them that way, okay? All right, now let's look at converting a decimal to a fraction. So we have a decimal number, we're going to move it into a fraction. And you're going to do this, I like to read the number in my head or out loud, and I want to listen to the place value that it has. Now that means I'm not reading it as 0.67, I'm going to read it as 67 hundredths. Or I'm not going to read it as 0.7, I'm going to read it as 7 tenths. And when I read it that way, it helps me think of what it would look like as a fraction. So you're going to read the decimal using place value. So, for example, Riley, could you read this number for me, please, in using place value?
0 and 45 hundredths.
Thank you. So 45 hundredths, right? So when I think of 45 hundredths, what would that look like as a fraction? What would be the numerator and what would be the denominator? What do you think?
You would have, since it was 45 hundredths, you would have 45 over 100.
45 as the numerator and 100 as the denominator. And we want to remember to always simplify. So can I pull a factor out of 45 over 100? What number can go into both? 5. Good, class. How many times does 5 go into 45, class? 9. How many times does 45 go into 100? 20. Good job. That is your simplified fraction. So I like to say, okay, that's 9/20ths, that's 45 hundredths, that's 36 hundredths. And as I say it, it makes it easy for me to visualize how it would look as a fraction. And that's a simple way for us to do it. Now, sometimes we need to convert from a fraction to a decimal. If we need to convert from a fraction to a decimal, you're going to take the top number, divide it by the bottom number. Top number goes into in the house or division bar. Now, you know me, and I like to sometimes have little games that I play with my head so I can remember these things, because little mind tricks that I use. So on this one, here's the trick I like to use. It's a very small post-it note. You don't have to do this on your paper. I like to do it. I'm just going to do it on mine. So when I was a kid, I used to play a game called King of the Hill. Has anybody in here ever played King of the Hill? Okay. So here's the hill. Where is the king? On top of the hill, right? Here's our king. There's our king on top of the hill. Now, our king, we know he's the king because he's on the top. Now, where do kings live? Not when they're on the hill, but where do they live? In their castle. So here's my king's castle. And when he's ready, he's going to go in his castle. Remember, the king's on top, he goes in the castle. Here is my fraction. The king is on top. Who's the king? What number? 1. He's going to go in our division bar castle. Who's left outside the castle trying to get in? 2. So now, let's try it. Can 2 go into 1? No. So what do? I annex my zeros, I add the decimal. Can 2 go into 10?
Yes.
How many times?
5.
5. So 1/2 is equivalent to 5 tenths. Now think about that, what we just did. We took 5 tenths, we can make 5 over 10, which, when we simplify, equals 1/2. Do you see how they're the same?
Yes.
So when I think of how to divide and to make a fraction into a decimal, I think, okay, who's the king? The king's on top. That's my numerator. Numerator goes into the division bar because that's the castle. And I always remember where to put my numbers. It's just a little trick I've always done in my head to help me out. So, a little bit of extra piece. So move that out of the way. Alright, so now that we've figured that out, and who's the king and who's going to the castle, we're going to now go to a practice problem. And I'm going to create this practice problem. I'm going to use 3/4. Alright guys, 3/4, I want to convert that to a decimal. If I'm going to do that, who's the king? 3. He goes into the division bar. Who's on the outside?
The 4.
The denominator. Can 4 go into 3? No. Add my decimal, add a 0. Can 4 go into 30? How many times? 7. 7 times 4 is? Class?
28.
Good. Add another 0. Can 4 go into 20?
Yes.
How many times?
4.
5. 5 times 4 is? 20. Alright, there we go. So, we know that 3/4 is equivalent to 75 hundredths. And there you go. Alright, let's do another one. Okay, this time we're going to convert a fraction to a percent. Okay, so the first thing you're going to do in this case is you're going to turn the fraction into a decimal. Just like we did here. Okay, that's the first thing. Then, move the decimal to the right. Just like we did all the way up here. So that's the second step. Do this, then do this. Alright, so let's look at an example. Let's take 2/4. Okay? What goes in the division bar?
2.
What goes outside?
4.
Can 4 go into 2? No. Can 4 go into 20?
Yes.
5 times, right?
Yes.
Okay, so we have 0.5. We're not done though. We have to take our 0.5 and move our decimal 2 times. Once, twice. Now, do you see how I have a little space holder here with nothing in it?
Yeah.
We're going to put a 0 in there. So now I end up with 50%. 2/4 is 50%. Does that make sense? Yeah, because 2/4 simplifies to 1/2, right? And 1/2 is 50%. Alright, let's look at the last one. Percent to a decimal. In this case, we're going from a percent and now we're moving to a decimal. Well, we said in order to go from a decimal to a percent, we go 2 spots to the right. Well, what do you think we do if we're going from the other way? Kiki?
I believe we're going 2 spots to the left.
2 spots to the left, right? We're going to do the opposite. So we're going to go 2 spots to the left. So if we have 45%, I'm going to go, and it's always, those little percenters, they remind me because there's 2 little circles, we move 2 little spots, okay? So I'm going to start where the percentage sign is. I'm going to move it once, twice, and I'm going to get 0.45 or 45 hundredths. Alright, now we're going to go over to page 73. We're going to do some practices. The first one, 36% to a decimal. We're going from a percent to a decimal. If we look over at our examples, percent to a decimal was the last one we did, right? Move 2 spots to the left. Alright, so let's take 36% and move it once, twice. And what do we get, class?
36 hundredths.
36 hundredths or 0.36. Good. Alright? Now we're going to change 56 hundredths to a fraction. We're going from a decimal to a fraction. Look at your rules. What do we do? William.
You're going to read the decimal using place value.
Read the decimal using place value. So what did you read?
5600.
So what does that tell you should be your numerator and your denominator?
Your numerator should be 20, 50, or 56.
56 over
100.
100, because these say the same thing. 56 hundredths, 56 hundredths. But am I done?
No.
I need to what?
Simplify.
Simplify. Who can simplify this one for me? Lane?
You can divide by 2 to 23 over. No.
What is it? 20.
23.
Are you sure? What's 50 divided by 2?
Oh, 28.
28, yeah. I know. I knew you had it right. So 28 over 50. Are we still done?
No.
No! What can we still do? Simplify.
You divide by 2 again.
And what would we get?
You would get 14 over 25.
Good. Okay, guys, I'm going to let you now finish the last 4 on your own. If you have any questions, go back to your notes, read all the steps to help you, okay? You can also talk to me later, rewatch the video if you need to, and get the help. If you need to email me, I'm here to help you, okay? Thanks, guys. Have a great day.